Good morning and welcome to today's Lord Mayor's Knowledge Miles lecture on what it takes to succeed as a female engineer with Caroline Hamilton, MBE, Chief Executive of the Safety Assessment Federation. I'm Charlotte Dalbrashley and I'm the manager of the FS Club at ZN in the City of London. And it is a great pleasure for me to introduce you to Caroline this morning to discuss her career journey, which spans manufacturing, nuclear decommissioning consultancy, and regulatory compliance. Caroline is a chartered mechanical engineer and brings a wealth of experience in problem solving, people skills, and technical expertise. Today, she will reflect on the importance of personal growth, resilience, and leveraging individual strengths to overcome challenges and succeed, attributes vital to any successful career progression, and particularly in a male-dominated field. Now, before I hand over to Caroline, some brief housekeeping points. The session will be recorded and available to watch on our website within 48 hours, so you can share the recording with any aspiring engineers you may know. We'll also be holding a 20-minute Q&A session after the presentation, so please use the GoToWebinar chat facility to send your questions in to me early, and then I can feed them into the conversation. Now, Caroline, I'm pleased to announce the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So bear with me while we get our slides up on the screen.
Thank you.
And there, we're good to go. So good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for attending. I always find these sort of sessions a little bit unnerving. We've lived lives for at least 4 years using Teams where we meet people, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but we meet people online and we see them. So today, not seeing you is a little bit unnerving and a little bit unusual, but it'll be entirely fine. Also, we did have a little bit of a discussion about the timing. It's right before Easter, so again, another grateful thank you for those of you that have managed to come along today, because I know some of you might be jumping in cars and heading off on holidays, so have a lovely Easter break. So usually at the beginning of a presentation, I would have a slide that summarises, just like Charlotte did, the expectations of the meeting. And rather than do that, what I'm going to do is manage expectations in a different way. Let me just... Apologies, my slide doesn't want to move on to the next slide. There we go. So, some presentations that I do, and I did say this is not a technical presentation, some presentations that I do, and I've been at other places like universities, I tend to use images. I do like the, pictures paint 1,000 words, and I very much find it a lot easier to talk around pictures than a load of words. The other thing is, if you put loads of words on a slide, people are reading the slide and usually not listening to you. It's one of the things that, again, I'll touch on later, but listening is an incredibly important part of things. So I'm not a technical expert. Rather, if I was to use an idiom, I've long considered myself a bit of a jack of all trades. However, in having to think about this presentation, it really made me think about, am I a master of any? And is the master of one being maybe just me? So today I might not tell you anything that you don't already know, but I really hope that in the next 20-25 minutes and some Q&A, that the presentation that reflects on who I am and along the way sharing some little pieces of me, I hope by the end it might make you think hard about who you are. The other point, so the jack of all trades image you should get, the image on the right. Now, some of you might have seen this. It's about what children draw and what they're trying to draw and what it really turns out like if you created it. So one parent created in 3D the 3D images of what their child had drawn. So as I said, I like to use a lot of images. Some of them might be a bit grainy. Some of them, there might be, that tangible link might just be there, but bear with me. I'm trying to paint a picture through the words that I say during the course of the session. So there is one thing here, the elephant in the room. So at the start of meetings, I am not afraid also of sort of challenging that bit that is the tough bit, that everybody sometimes maybe sort of wanders around but don't really get the teeth into it. So again, in sort of managing expectations, when I start a meeting and get involved in meetings, I do really like to deal with the big issue. That's why we're here. Now, a big issue here is perhaps where we started with the title for this talk. So I was asked to come along and talk about how have you been successful as a female engineer? I just consider myself an engineer. Coincidentally, I am female and half of the population roughly is. But I get it. It's often a male dominated world in general. So what? So I'm really struggling with whether it's a problem, whether it's an issue, and whether it's something I've got to highlight. I'm a female engineer. I graduated from university scaringly a quarter of a century ago now, and at the time, females in the mechanical engineering department, the ratio was about 1 to 9. In all that time, that's 25 years, and at the time there was lots and lots of initiatives, women in science and engineering, etc. And there's been lots of initiatives since. So in all that time, diversity and inclusion has really been a hot topic, with effort seemingly poured into it, resources, money, all sorts of things. And the current stats at the mechanical engineering department in Newcastle is still pretty similar. So it's maybe about 1 to 8, 1 to 7, if we're generous. So I do worry that diversity and inclusion as a topic actually sometimes makes us more divisive, and perhaps pushes us in a certain direction of thinking that perhaps isn't conducive to the changes that we want. So it will come out again during the talk today, but I really try to think about opportunity rather than outcome. I don't think that I was just asked to come and talk today because I'm a female engineer. I think probably somebody's recognised something and thought people will hear something hopefully useful, or at least a little bit thought-provoking. But throughout my career, I would like to think that I've got the job because I'm good at it. And I think most people would like to be in that territory and wouldn't like to just be chosen because of a statistic or improvement of a statistic. So it's something where we need to create an environment and everything that goes with it that creates that equality of opportunity, not outcome. The outcomes will serve themselves and people make their own choices. And along the way, you'll hear some of the choices and the decisions that I've made. So some grainy images I think you should be able to see right now. I'm going to tell a little story around the images as I move through. So in the beginning, I'm taking you right back to the start of probably what is my engineering career and where that interest stemmed from. So in the beginning, some of the images on the left is my dad was a welder fabricator, and being the youngest of 3 siblings, I was his shadow. And because he worked on quite large projects and worked away from home, so the image on the bottom left is up at the yard in very northeast Scotland, where they would on the dry land they would make certain parts of oil rigs and they would get floated out when they were fabricating the oil rigs offshore. So he worked on really huge projects, and this was sort of in the 80s. If I didn't spend time in the garage with Dad, probably wouldn't have saw a lot of him. He would work away and leave very early on a Monday morning and come back on a Friday evening. But I did enjoy what I saw. As a tiny child, I had my own welding mask. What I didn't get was full cover shoes. So if anybody remembers the T-bar shoes that little girls wear, a welding spark did find its way in there one day, and I realised that actually maybe I need to cover up. The image in the centre is my dad worked on, as mentioned, some really, really interesting projects. So he worked on the Channel Tunnel. By this time in his fabricator world, he'd started to progress. He was moving up the ladder and he was doing inspection duties and managing duties. And he worked on the gas systems that are in the Channel Tunnel now, of which I went through it for the first time last year, which was marvellous. But on the right, that's where I wanted to be, that's what I wanted to do. So as I got older, I started to get these experiences where I would spend time with him and I was getting my hands on, not quite to this extent just then. So I'm going to move into the first little piece of me, well, the third, I'll give you the two earlier, but this one about me at the start of my journey and who I am, and I guess where I started and how it shaped me. And this is one that I think is a constant. So at around 12, 16 years old, that territory of secondary school, I loved maths and science. To be fair, I loved most subjects. I liked school. I was really lucky. But this bit that grew throughout school and was encouraged, I guess, by not just my parents, but by teachers, was the love of maths and science and this curious mind. And I think these are some of the fundamentals to engineering and problem solving. And I had this really keen interest of the practical hands-on engineering. And I really, really was quite interested in taking that as a route. So going back to these images, that one on the right, that's what I wanted to look like. And I found an image that probably is a reasonable similarity. However, there's a pivotal point in the story, and it was when my dad was roughly about the age that I am now. He still would do some hands-on work himself at the time. He moved on to projects all over the north of the country, the gas pipelines that span the country, bringing gas to our houses. When they were all first laid, he was working on some really, really big projects. And he was in a pipe trench, and he'd come back that weekend and he'd said to me, when you're my age, and that's the age I am now, I don't want you lying in a pipe trench. I want you to know about the professional aspects of the job, the professions that are there, the people that do these jobs, and I really want you to see those sorts of things. So he would take me with him, and I would now not just see him in the garage at home. He would go off to projects, particularly in Yorkshire and Lancashire. I can see now out of my window over to the borders of Scotland, to Stranraer, where there's a gas pipeline over on the seabed to Northern Ireland. And at these projects, he would take me with him, and I would be allowed on site. Now, I'm not sure these would be the easiest things to do now. Because of health and safety, we have to be sensible and reasonable. However, I spent time with project managers. So I would go and spend the whole day with the project manager, seeing what he'd done, who we saw. The gas pipelines going across swathes of land would need to go ahead with archaeologists. There would need to be archaeological digs. They would need to investigate the ground and check that they weren't disrupting anything as they'd done that. I would spend time in the drawing offices. So this was the time when actually things were still, there was still hand drafting, there was still lots and lots of paper. And I saw sort of the side of it where I really did enjoy art, and I enjoyed being able to see technical drawings. At that time, I also had the opportunity via one of my teachers in my secondary school. Her husband now works for Euratom, and he at the time worked at Sellafield. So at the age of roughly 14, 15, I was inside a live nuclear site. So for those of you that are on the call, that's not a straightforward thing to do. It isn't, you can just pop along and head in. There's various security issues and health and safety issues. And certainly there was a bit of a terrifying issue on the way out when I had to be body scanned, which was a normal part of checking that you're not carrying any contamination. But because I was quite small at the time, my arms didn't reach far enough down the scanner, and to be able to push the buttons at the end, it wasn't recognising I was there. But these opportunities, this comes on to a really key point, I think, of some of what I like to do and some of what I think we should all think about doing. And it's about this opportunity. It's about offering. If there's something that you know and that others might benefit from knowing too, tell them. I do this anyways as part of the nature of who I am, unless there's anything that's confidential. If I think it's useful for somebody to know it, I will tell them. And it doesn't mean that I tell everyone everything, because if we spent all of our time doing that, we'd never achieve anything. But I think it's back to that earlier point of opportunities and direction. If you really think it's going to be something that'll move things along in a meeting, or it'll be something where it'll help somebody make some decisions moving forward, then share that. I was extremely lucky, and to be able to make the decisions I did early on of where I was going in my career, what I'd go and study at sixth form next. So at sixth form, taking the A-level choices, I could have chosen whatever I wanted to do. I enjoyed art, I enjoyed some of the other subjects, but because of the discussions I'd had with the project manager in particular, I understood that actually if I want to take this further on, I need to be choosing the sciences, I need to be choosing the maths. I was informed to be able to make the right choices. So that's one thing that I think is really key. I don't talk about it in detail in this talk today, because I wanted to choose around 6 to 8 things and it wasn't in there. But helping people make good choices means they need to be aware of those things. Therefore, we need to offer that information and encourage that awareness up front. So the academics. So again, early on in my career, again, some grainy images here. Apologies for the granularity of these pictures, but I think you get the gist of where we're at. So at sixth form, I had to change schools to go to sixth form. I'd been at a tiny comprehensive of only around 150 students. I went to a sixth form where the sixth form department was 150 students per year. So a significant change and a different world and pace of learning for me when I got put into that environment where I had more peers. And the school encouraged me to reach to the top. I was getting grades good enough to apply to Oxford or to Cambridge or to Durham. And again, for those of you familiar with the academic journey of engineering, it isn't at this point they stay with quite broad degrees. So they would look at here at Oxford, you read engineering science. So it's a broad engineering degree. I knew at this time that I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, and perhaps I wasn't staying true to myself. And that's one thing that I really have reflected on while putting this together, and who I am now that I'm older, is that I think it's really important to stay true to yourself. And at the time, I went with what was suggested. Who wouldn't want to sit in that dining hall? I sat there before Harry Potter. But engineering science meant that a quarter of the course was electrical engineering. I knew I wanted to be mechanical. Electrical engineering and electricity and that part of science is magical to me. It's total magic. Mechanical engineering, again, to give us some terminology, we get called the clunkies. You know, it's very much X means Y will happen. The magic of it, electrical engineering, I found it really, really tough. I really struggled, and that meant that during the first year, everything went fine apart from that module. So it felt like the end of the world. I failed a module. It's a quarter of the course. I resat it. I still failed it by 3 marks. Again, appreciating what that is. A pass is 40%. You know, this was a dramatic fail. I really didn't understand the topic. And it really did feel like the end of the world when you're a young person. Fees had just been introduced. I really felt like I'd let everybody down. It was when I first went off to university, the first member of the family, really to do that, even though I was the youngest. And it wasn't a great time. I was really quite upset. But I did think, a quarter of this course is electrical engineering. I don't like that. I'm not good at it, and I don't want to do it. My second choice had always been Newcastle, and I made the difficult decision to move because the resets had been already when the term had started, because at Oxford it's intensive learning. It's 3 8-week terms. It's a very fast pace of learning. But I say here, the beginning of the end, I matriculated at the house, as it's known. I studied, if you recognise the images, at Christ Church. And in Oxford, you matriculate, i.e. you join. I didn't need to graduate to continue being a member of the house, and there are events and things that I've been involved in since. which has felt really nice because the people that I met there, including the tutors, have really kind of been quite instrumental in who I've become. I still, in my new job now, live with a friend that I met at university almost 30 years ago. So continuing the academics, I mentioned I moved to Newcastle. The left-hand picture is the mechanical engineering department. I need to go and get an up-to-date picture because it doesn't look like that hideous building anymore. They've moved forward. So they've moved forward, and so has the degree courses. So at the time, I was the last year that done hand drafting. We were doing both hand drafting and computer 3D. And that's what phones looked like. So I've left this in because I've stolen some of these images from slides that I give to others, particularly when I go back to Newcastle University. And I do talk about this end of the world moment to them, but I talk about it in this sense. A little piece of me, what I've realised about myself is that I'm not too hard on myself now that I've got a bit older, a bit wiser perhaps. It did feel like the end of the world at the time. However, my time at Newcastle University and what I achieved there was I achieved a 2-1. I had lots of other strings and feathers in my cap, so strings to my bow, feathers in my cap, because I set up a rugby league team. I ratified that team. I was the deputy sports officer for the university, so I supported somebody that takes a sabbatical. I supported them while studying. Which meant that I organised the athletic union event for the year, the big dinner, hundreds and hundreds of people. Also, the people that joined in that rugby league team in our first season, we were runners up to Manchester, who'd been unbeaten and still were, because we lost out by 1 point. But also, I then got to go and do go on to representative honours. So, albeit that I didn't get a 2-1, if I'd studied harder, I do think I could have got a first at Newcastle because I really enjoyed the course. The content was totally up my street. But I wanted to do other things, and I wanted to do other things that I enjoyed. But one thing here is sort of that resilience and bounce back ability. I do really think I've got it, and I think that's something we should encourage younger people now, if not all of us, to really reflect on things and think, you know what, the right-hand image, stole it off Forrest Gump, but it happens sometimes. Can we bounce back and move on? So moving into the real world, part 1, I've got part 1, 2 and 3, and I've got a little story with each and a little piece of me that I'm going to feed back on this. So there's a really young looking me. It looks like I'm receiving my first paycheck or something, but actually as I arrived at React Engineering, it's time when I was still finishing, I'd finished university, but I hadn't finished the representative honours. What they allowed at university was 12 months after graduation to support the growth of the sport, that you could continue to play rugby for students. So albeit that you weren't in university, you were able to go back and be part of the team if you were selected. And I was fortunate enough to do that, and I toured Russia. So he's there helping me on my way with my fundraising to get my flights over to Russia. So I started at React Engineering as a project engineer. It was an engineering consultancy. It was in northwest Cumbria, right on the doorstep of Sellafield. And the focus of their work was nuclear cleanup. The progression at React was actually supported by Steve, that's on the photo, one of the 3 founding directors. And he was a great support, a great inspiration. And the 3 founding directors at this company, I've never really seen it emulated since, but they acted as one, which is not usual to not have one senior head, one managing director. If you went to ask any of them a question, you got the same answer. The work that I'd done there was a lot of project management, a lot of strategic focus. Now, one thing I've mentioned in that second bullet point is problem definition. As engineers, we love solving problems. Sometimes we're not very good at defining them first. And I think that's one thing that I've learned on this career path, is that you really, really need to understand your problem before you solve it. That sounds like common sense. The next time that you're floundering with anything, even be a project in the garden, really think, did we understand before we started what we wanted to achieve, what our problem was, and roughly the process of getting to an outcome, not necessarily what the outcome is, unless you know it, you might want your flower beds looking in a certain way. But did you really understand at the start the real problem? There was a huge safety focus. It's a nuclear environment. It was incredibly restrictive in some of the ways that you'd done things, but this organisation really looked at it in what they called a creative manner, purposely didn't use the word innovative. Innovative is sometimes interpreted as, new technology, really far-reaching, really unusual application. What they were looking at, let's look at it at old technology, stuff that we know that works, almost tractor or farming technology, and how do you creatively introduce that into a nuclear environment for the purposes of cleanup, etc. Because equipment that we know works forever on a farm should hopefully work in a nuclear cell. If you use new technology, it's untried and often untested in that environment, and we don't want to be in the situation where it fails. So the first thing about this role and the little piece of me that I learned, so there's a lot of text on this slide for once, and it's because I had 3 parts to this. I'm not afraid of asking questions. I never have been. However, Pete, one of the other directors at this organisation, he would say there's no such thing as a stupid question. What I didn't put in there is unless you haven't thought about it first. So if you went to Pete and said, Pete, the question being, help me do X, he'd say, what do you know about X? Can you tell me what you've done to investigate it? Why can't you do it yourself? So he would ask a load more questions. He would then say you should have asked all of those questions of yourself first. What have you done to figure this out and get the job done before you've come and asked me? So he was really encouraging, and I think that's something that's really important. You shouldn't make people afraid to ask questions. I wasn't afraid of asking him questions, but what he made me do is really think about what I was going to ask him. And he'd help me on my journey by thinking it out loud. There's one in the middle there from Albert Einstein. I like to always sneak Albert Einstein in some way because we've got the same birthday. But the last point about questioning and asking questions is something that my husband once said, and I'm sure he stole it from somewhere else, and we have a nice thing of stealing with pride. But he says, assume the other person knows something you don't. And again, I'll get onto that when I move on to some of the experiences I've had in different environments of what can you learn from people around you. So part 2. I moved to Igesund, and I had a little section previously in this presentation, and I did think I've got a lot in here. I've got a lot of slides to get through today. And I arrived at Igesund from 13 years with React Engineering. So I said I'm going to give you 3 real world roles. I've only had 3 jobs. I've only worked for 3 companies. You see other people that every couple of years are moving between different organisations. I really like to get in and understand an organisation. And I think that's why I stay with them for so long. But when I moved here, it was a purposeful move. At React Engineering, I'd got to the point in my career where I was the operations manager, as you have seen on the previous slide. And what I was doing in that was I was controlling a lot of selling and delivering of the work, and in particular the delivering. I was helping support junior engineers progress by helping them to understand how do you scope and sell the work, how do you do the work as a consultant. So it felt like I had started to move into the territory of senior level management of governance and control of work and the processes behind that, but particularly the training. And what I felt was I wasn't doing a lot of the actual work myself. And on that nuclear licence site of Sellafield, there are hundreds and thousands of interesting scientific problems, and I really felt like I was missing out. I didn't want to take a step backwards at that organisation. I wanted to maybe do something different. So what I'd done was I moved to Igesund, and I moved there as a project manager because albeit I'd project managed and I was teaching people how to manage their own projects, I felt like I was losing my technical edge. So here I was properly immersed in, it's a manufacturing, it's a paper mill and a biomass power plant. So properly immersed in that working world of how things are made, a real manufacturing environment. As a project manager, one of my approaches would be to really understand. And this is where the little piece of me comes first. At Igisund, they actually use different industries to learn and improve themselves, and they use the Toyota way. So a number of managers and operators, process workers, would spend time down at Toyota in Derby and in the Midlands to understand and take some of their training courses about the Toyota way. And one of the real things that I loved, and I think it's because I like pictures, I like to see things, I like to look, I like to understand, is this one about Genshi Genbutsu. And apologies to anybody on the call that is more proficient in Japanese than I am. But ultimately what this means is go and look and see. So it's look-see. So if you as a manager get told of a problem and you get told of some solutions and some approaches, how do you know that they're all correct, that they would work, that that's really what the problem is? And it's really encouraging. In Toyota in particular, they get the managers are out and about on the plant quite regularly, and it's this encouragement to go and have a look, go and check, go and see. I would encourage anybody to do that in the engineering world, because without that, I'm not quite sure how you learn. Not everything that's written in a book will teach you. So yeah, I'm very much this is I say a little piece of me, this is a big part of me, of really getting involved, understanding, and sometimes then stepping back, because you don't want to overpower those that actually it's their role to then resolve that, to deal with that problem. So the second little story at Igesund was this one. So as a senior manager, what can you learn from an apprentice? So this is a picture of the mill that I worked at. On shut days, so every 5 weeks, the mill would shut for roughly 24 hours, and a lot of maintenance work would go on. It's a continuous process, so paper making is a continuous process, so it doesn't stop until it stops, and usually you only want to do that for a real reason, and that would be the maintenance shut. At the time, as you'll have noticed off the slide, I was in charge of the maintenance team, so I had 35 craft members, so a mechanical maintenance team. Notably all male. I never got any expressions of interest of females wanting to come and join the department, or as apprentices or otherwise. But the point was, during shut day, certain pieces of PPE are mandated. You must wear a hard hat. People could be working overhead. They might not be, but they could be. And rather than try and create difficulties of sectioning areas, etc., everybody on that day would wear a hard hat. I got a report when I arrived back after shut day from the site manager. So the site manager is 24/7 on the site. I arrived back to a report of 2 of the maintenance team went down into that dark section that you can see underneath. They went down there, they weren't wearing the hard hats. Okay, so what I needed to do was start the disciplinary process. So to cut a long story short, what I'd done was provide the CCTV of 1 or 2 minutes to both a lead engineer separately, but a lead engineer and the apprentice. So when I sat the apprentice down, I showed him the footage. I said, this has been reported. What can you see is wrong? Not sure. Okay, well, what do you need to do on shut days? Wear PPE. Yeah, are you wearing yours? No. Okay, so we've agreed there that you should, but you weren't. Yeah, okay. And I said to him, if you were in my situation, what do you think I've got to do now? And he looked at me and he said, I'm not sure, because I don't know what you do. Wow, that was powerful. Really, really powerful. And that was part of this next little piece of me, of really listening to people and listening carefully and acting upon it. Because I then made me think, not, oh gosh, that was quite an ignorant thing to say. What it made me think was, fair point. I've been in situations when I had senior managers or others around me and I didn't really know what they'd done either. So probably we should talk about this and I should tell them. So I did act upon it at some point afterwards. I shared what my role's about. My role at that time was very much in supporting them to be able to do their job well. And we spent a bit of time talking about those things. And over time, that department, I think, really had quite a cultural shift in how they were supported by managers. And if you think of the carrot and the stick, there's definitely always the carrot. To me, is the bigger incentive. You can't just keep hitting people with a stick. It's not fair and it's not nice. And why would anybody want to be under a manager that does that? So, you know, the carrot and the stick approach is that very much that I like people to work together as a team, even though I might be the manager. It's got to be a collaborative approach. You've got to work together. And therefore, I think this bit, when you're working with people, you've really, really got to listen hard and act on what they're telling you. So moving into part 3, because I'm conscious that I'm nearly at the end of my time, and this is roughly at the end of my career to date. But this is where I am now at Safety Assessment Federation. I've popped up there the mission statement. The mission statement should convey who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And I hope that does. We work in the engineering, testing, inspection sector, certification sector. Our aim is to drive high standards, and that's by collaborative development of guidance, and it's for everyone. It isn't self-serving. We don't do this just for ourselves. It's very much about advancing safety for all. And I can guarantee that even for those of you that are perhaps non-technical, all of you on this call are most likely to have come across something that our sector will have touched. If you want to talk more about that, always give me a shout, but you will. It's a trade association and not-for-profit, and a membership organisation. So our members are full members, so those that are accredited to a standard, and those that aren't but work to the principles. And examples of that, the activities I've pointed out there that link to the mission statement, is we prepare guidance for industry, for people within our sector, people within our sector but aren't doing our role, as an example, maintenance, and also for users and duty holders. But one key thing, and particularly the Secretariat myself, it's help and support to policy and standards makers. And usually that isn't just my expertise, it's by using others. So the image is here. I arrived at this role in March 2020, 2nd of March. So I think for some people this is starting to become hazy, but the 2nd of March, London was already changing. The office is in London. COVID had arrived, but we weren't quite sure what it was called at that time. We just knew there was an unpleasant flu that was lingering, and we were a little bit unnerved about this. So the COVID arrived, and I had to do something about it. And as Charlotte, are you just giving? Have I got two? Is that the 2-minute call?
Yeah, if you can wrap up in a couple of minutes, that'll be great. Thank you.
I'm definitely on the last couple of slides. So COVID had arrived. I needed to do something about it. And how I done that was really, I'm going to brush over the Brexit issue, but how I done that was about the networking element. And I think this is, again, if we come back to sort of who you are and what you are, I don't, and I never have, and I learned this in my early days as a consultant, you don't need to know all of the answers. And albeit that, you know, the phrase is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Actually, knowledge is really, really important, but actually having that network, having the people that you can call upon to help explain in more detail, or call upon to support, call upon to step forward, having that network brings all of that knowledge to life. And I think that's really, really crucial part of what I do now. Actually, when I created very recently a map of the network breadth and depth that we have at SAFED, so not just me, we're in the territory of hundreds of network connections, to the point where it's not just an organisation. We know there's this organisation that exists, but actually where we have a named contact, and I believe that I've done enough to foster relationships to be able to pick up the phone and make that contact useful, 2 ways as well. So this is my last slide. This is a food for thought. Do you know what your sort of crucial skills are? Do you know what your strengths and weaknesses are? Do other people see you the same way that you expect them to see you? And parting info, if you read the spiel and have bothered to attend like you have, thank you very much for sticking along with us. But I said that I only have a few technical things that I think. This is a Hamilton Hound. So if nothing else, you're going to leave today knowing that there is a breed of dog called the Hamilton Hound in Germany. Thank you very, very much for your time, and I'll have a hand back to Charlotte and the team for questions.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was really interesting. I particularly enjoyed hearing about what inspired you tinking away in the garage with your dad as a child. And I think you have some really useful advice there, no matter what sort of career you're in, and also in everyday life as well, especially the points about sharing knowledge, developing a big network, and also acknowledging the elephant in the room as well. I think that can take away a bit of power from it, and staying true to who you are and what you want rather than societal expectations. And speaking of societal expectations, Clive has asked, isn't there too much societal pressure on women to wear makeup and dress up rather than doing valuable jobs like engineering? And how can we make that shift as a society? It's a pretty big question there.
It's a pretty big question. Thank you very much for that question, Clive. And I would say there probably is, and this is where it's getting in early to help support young people to not feel the pressures of, particularly social media, I think has a big influence on very young people at the minute. I don't wear makeup, I never have. I really have better things to do with my time. So that's, kind of in answer to your question. I've made the choice that I don't want to do that. Don't get me wrong, who doesn't like dressing up and going out and enjoying a night out? But I would agree there, and I do think that part of what we need to do is getting much sooner. And I'm not sure how we change that now because of social media presence, and that I hear young people saying they want to be influencers, and it's like, influence what? Kind of, you need a bit of a skill and a passion, and what is that? So it's a great question. I don't know the answer other than for an engineering perspective, we need to make it an awareness much sooner, not just the children, but perhaps parents, because you tend to follow people into professions and maybe they don't know that this exists for their children and their skill set either. So
I think that's very true as well. You can't be what you can't see. And well, when I grew up, I never saw any female engineers, so that was just something I didn't consider. And I think also about Clive's point about what society values. I mean, for centuries, the message from society has been they value men for their physical strengths, knowledge, power, and for women, it is for what you look like. So I think there's so much work that needs to be done to dismantle all of that, but it's definitely a worthy cause. Next question is going on to education. Should schools concentrate more on character education rather than academic achievement?
oh gosh, that's a big one, isn't it? I would love that schools done more around the behavioural part. So what schools I feel do is tend to want the children to conform to a particular behaviour standard for, be quiet, listen, etc. But it means that if you leave and you use other skills, behavioural skills, you're not in that territory because you've not been practicing them. I think schools have a real challenging time with the curriculums and what they've got to do and how they're measured and monitored, which doesn't make life easy. But certainly the schools that use, as an example, external organisations, bodies, STEM ambassadors, get all pupils to come in and talk about their careers, all of those sorts of things, I think can help support a different outlook for their pupils. But I do think there's something that schools could do in the capacity of well-being um, that they aren't doing. So just preaching, don't use your phones, it doesn't really cut the mustard for me. I think there could be something in terms of how you can even breathe, which I know sounds mad as a box of frogs, but it's the only thing that you can do to overcome your stress system. You can breathe in a particular way and slow your heart rate down. You can't think that to happen. So I think there's some things perhaps in schools in terms of well-being that we should be looking at supporting our young people with, to help them move forward and be able to make informed choices.
Yeah, I agree. That's very true. We're about out of time now, but thank you very much, Caroline, for sharing your time and journey with us today. It's been really valuable, and thank you everyone for connecting with us virtually. Wishing everyone a fantastic Easter break with lots of treats and hopefully lots of spring sunshine. We also have more lectures coming up as we head into April, so keep a look on the website for those. Thanks everyone, and goodbye.